I'm dying up here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can I help?
No, you can't. It's done. The common phrase that a comic will utter when their set hasn't gone down too well is a TV series made by the Showtime network, and it is executive produced by Jim Carrey. And it's,
I've heard of him.
Yeah, and it's based on a book by William Nodelsader. William Nodelsader.
Bill to his friends.
Bill to his friends. Billy. He
What's it about?
wrote a book about the comedy scene on Sunset Strip in the early 70s.
Real laughter, it's cathartic. It's the current that moves through an audience when some truth is revealed. Figure out what it is that you have to say. Get your ass on that stage. Say it.
And there were other scenes going on Sunset Strip in the early 70s. I've read about some of them, and they're very interesting scenes and maybe even entertaining, depending on how much Laurel Canyon you can take coming out of your speakers. This is about comics, all different comics, working in one club or trying to get a gig in one club, Goldies Club, that is perhaps a thinly veiled real-life club, run by Melissa Leo, the sexy Melissa Leo, who plays Goldie. And all these young comics are trying to get in and get up onto the main stage from the basement stage, because this club is a conduit to Carson. And in that time, Johnny Carson was the big Tonight Show host who had a reach across the land. And that means that instead of having to play in little dives, you could actually start to go on big tours and get booked by big agents and start doing theatres and Las Vegas and all the big zones that your comic wants to do, so that he or she can start making some money.
Is it funny?
It's so funny. It's funny.
I mean, what I mean by that is it a comedy?
Yeah, it's no. It's actually quite, and I'll use a word that I don't use in conversation, but that I've noticed people using when they talk on the radio and stuff about shows. It's quite dark. Yeah. There's crime, there's death, there's drugs, there's nudism, there's sexualism, and racism, and every ism. And
is it nudism or nudity?
Nudism, and every ism and asm that you could want in a show about the early 1970s Sunset Strip. It's funny in that there's all these different comics. They've all got their own style, and the writers who are very adept at writing particularly to each different comic's style, and the way they banter with each other afterwards, they're merciless on each other. That's also funny, and it has a verisimilitude. I wasn't there. I don't know what it was like. It feels right. It looks great. The production design's fantastic. Not much music. And maybe nowadays we kind of put comedy, especially since the punk and post-punk period, we put comedy and music together a lot. But there's not really much music in it. There are characters that you really like, and there are characters that you despise and look forward to. One particular character is a very bad comic, and it's always enjoyable to see him get up on stage with his blow-waved beard and just be hostile and aggressive to the audience and blow every opportunity that he gets, especially because he's not very funny.
Right. What I'm wondering here is, are these comics, these characters, are they recognisably based on real-world comedians?
Every now and again, a couple of...
I mean, you describe him, I'm thinking it's Andrew Dice Clay, you know?
Every now and then, you get people peripheral to the main characters coming into the show who are clearly recognisable people from entertainment at that time. None of these people are recognisable to me. They often mention real-life comic names like George Carlin and Richard Pryor, who might not be known to the listeners of this podcast, but were huge comics in the 1970s in the US. And I'm not sure. Having not read the book, I'm not sure if these are, again, thinly veiled creations based on real life actual comics.
There's also a new David Simon show which is about to air on HBO called The Deuce. Right. Which is about the early days of the porn industry in New York.
The Deuce.
The Deuce.
Right.
The Deuce.
Okay.
Set in 1970s Times Square.
Okay.
Right?
Again.
So same era in each of these things, right? So there is a sense of the entertainment industry
loving on
so-called.
itself.
It's loving on itself, going back and rediscovering its modern day origins.
Of course, nostalgia is something we turn to
Yeah.
when the future looks grim.
Yeah.
And maybe for the entertainment industry in the US, the future is not looking so good. And so we remember the early times of heroin overdoses and beatings.
Oh, those were the days, weren't
Yeah,
they? Those were
and
the
brown
days.
brown paper bags handing in at the grocer, and they were the days. Weren't
Well,
they?
I haven't seen The Deuce. Oh, I started watching The Deuce. I thought I'll come back to that because it doesn't start till September.
Okay, we'll talk about it then.
And then what happened?
Yes.
Right, this HBO has been beset by leaks with Game of Thrones related material. Right.
Yep.
They've basically shut down their streaming site or their media streaming site because somewhere there's a leak. They got to plug that leak.
Somebody's leaking.
Somebody's leaking. I'm going to take you all down. And so you can't actually watch this stuff anymore.
Wow, you mean there would be a disgruntled employee at HBO?
Somewhere.
How interesting.
Anyway, one other thing about I'm Dying Up Here is that it actually there's a wave of material at the moment that seems to be about the stand-up comic's life, you know. And I mean, it's a small wave. It's a ripple, perhaps we should call it. There's a show called
An Undulation.
Crashing. An Undulation. There's a show called Crashing, created by and starring a guy called Pete Holmes, who is a very successful American stand-up comic. The show is about his early days when he gets up on stage and he crashes. Every time he performs, he crashes. He's terrible.
Yeah.
He comes home one day to find his wife bonking somebody else. So his relationship crashes, and then he ends up sleeping on the couches of comedians in New York. So he's crashing on people's couches.
Right.
It's a really cute concept.
Okay.
I've seen 4 or 5 episodes of it. Really like that show. It's good. And it brings in real world comedians.
Right.
Who basically guest roles.
Well, Louis C.K. does that with his show too. He brings in
That's right. Of course, Louis
real-
is another. Yeah,
That's a great show. I just want to say one thing about I'm Dying Up Here. It's one season, 10 episodes.
Half hours?
No, pretty much an hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Very, very contained. It could end now. The producers are aware that the numbers aren't great.
Yep.
But the network has been very generous and said, look, we don't want to drop the axe on this yet. We want to get all the writers back together, see them throw around some things, see what we can do for a second season. That may be Jim Carrey's,
Doesn't hurt to have somebody like Jim
influence.
Carrey on board as an EP, I would imagine.
I would think it would be very helpful to have somebody as popular as him and well liked to be able to keep things rolling. So I urge you to have a look at it, and then maybe those numbers will just lift a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
I would say this though about it's on HBO. Is this?
No, it's on Showtime.
It's Showtime. Okay.
Showtime.
Well, Showtime is the home of HBO.
Is it?
In Australia?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so it's probably an HBO show.
Well, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
At any rate,
you know all this.
At any rate, they did the same thing with Vinyl, right? I would just hold this as a warning. They commissioned the second season of Vinyl, and then they uncommissioned it.
All right.
It's like,
well,
yay! No,
look, it's a great thing. You can watch it, and at the very end, you're not going to go, "What happens to him?" And it's okay. It doesn't. It's not like Deadwood. Oh my.
We'll save that for another day. He's traumatized at the memory.
Oh, I am.
Anyway,
Can't believe I even said it.